So how do we convince academics to want to become more enterprising, to engage in higher academic enterprise? When I started academic enterprise a decade ago now, some of my academic colleagues thought I had sold out my intellectual soul to business and the community. They were not initially terribly keen to follow my lead or the knowledge-sharing principles I was commending them to accept as part of the necessary change process. So to convince them, I had to create some exemplary major projects in each faculty of the university, such as those mentioned earlier. These should show what could be done and be an inspiration to other academics. So to get the ball rolling and to make it worthwhile for academics to engage in this new way of working, we sought funding to free up the time of early adopters to get them involved in academic enterprise. We then developed a careful reward scheme to attract colleagues into developing their own new academic opportunities beyond means they were currently employing. I then set about designing and testing a new staff development process that would enable and empower the right kind of academics to learn how to become more enterprising in the most appropriate ways. The approach I developed with 4 other like-minded universities was called UPBEAT. UPBEAT stands for University Partnership for Benchmarking Enterprise and Associated Technologies. As the acronym implies, we wanted our enterprising academics to become more upbeat in the way they would work in higher academic enterprise, in the literal sense of the word upbeat. Our hope was that these academics would develop their own, more enterprising practices in a fast-acting way. So what does the upbeat process focus on to improve the capacities of traditional academics who are already excellent teachers and researchers? In short, it attempts to empower them with 4 extra human skills that are complementary to their existing roles as academics. 150 cases of exemplary higher academic enterprise developed using UPBEAT shows that there are indeed 4 critical human enterprise skills needed for successful enterprise project development. And these are not normal skills in high profile with traditional academics. While academics often develop research ideas that could lead to new products and processes which are meant to satisfy particular human needs or desires, academics mainly do this by undertaking rigorous experimental studies to make sure they fully understand a particular situation or need. They rarely think further as to how they can turn a theory they have built into a useful foresight that will actually enable a real improvement. So, for enterprising academic development, the first skill we try to engender through UPBEAT is what I call foresight enabling skill. This only requires a small but highly important change in the mindset of academics, so they begin to reformulate their fairly often abstract notions into something usable that will actually lead to a practical reality or implementation. I have to say I have found that academics can quickly learn how to turn such conceptual thought into a working reality when they know what they have to do in order to explain it to their external partners so they can understand it better. However, it's not sufficient for such academics to know how to express better what their external partners need to know. They also need to get a demand-side view when developing any higher academic enterprise. In particular, they have to learn more than what is needed, but rather what will be demanded by customers in sufficient numbers so that their enterprise development will eventually become something that will be financially viable. For, in an enterprising context, it's no good just developing something that's needed. If people won't demand it sufficiently to pay a realistic cost to purchase it, it will not be bought. In this respect, it is my contention that all higher academic enterprises have to wash their face financially. And ideally, academic entrepreneurs should also strive to make a good return on the university investment in terms of profit or other relevant reward. I call this characteristic or skill academic business acumen. And such a skill requires enterprising academics learning sufficient awareness of the demand side and especially key aspects of business to have a reasoned conversation and sensitive arguments with creative partners from business, industry and the community. Academics need such a skill not to become business people themselves, but to be able to incorporate such business thinking into the developing enterprise to ensure it eventually becomes a sustainable business. Knowledge about product design, design for production and marketing are just 3 of the contexts from business academics need to embrace. However, I repeat The upbeat ambition with respect to academic business acumen is not to turn academics into business people, only to develop in them a language for meaningful discussion and conversation, so that there can be mutual understanding of each other's position in any joint enterprise. At Salford, we are careful as to how deeply we get our academics to embrace business knowledge. This is because of our bad experience with our entrepreneurial professors and researchers in the 60s and 70s and 80s. This experience leads us to believe academics really become good business people, and if they attempt to do so, this often leads the university to lose much of their original academic value. Upbeat's third enterprising skill development looks inwards to the academics themselves and aims to ensure they become sufficiently stimulated to want to develop mighty personal individual performances with respect to their particular individual talents. And further, we need to convince them of the need to hone their own skills to perfection. To drive personal performance forward, the university needs to develop an appropriate reward scheme to incentivise continuous professional improvement in all their academic colleagues. For most academics, this can often be on the basis of simple academic promotion. However, if academics are not promoted for their work in academic enterprise, it is unlikely that they will want to get involved in this way. I call this academic enterprising skill simply mighty individual performance. And finally, with respect to developing the four enterprising skills, academics need to develop social network intelligence to make the most from their enterprising team members. For only through proper socialisation will the sum of the team's parts add innovatively more than the value of the individual parts themselves. Social networking intelligence, as I call this skill, is initially about collaboration and grows into creative teamwork. It develops into growing team partnerships, and at the highest level it relates to the formation of strategic alliances which drives an innovation into new heights. It is the binding force that ties all other skills together. So these four complementary enterprise skills need to be engendered in a traditional academic to ensure they become usefully enterprising. I call this overall model of entrepreneurial staff development the enterprising academic model. Having understood the need for the four new skills, we also have to understand what are the qualities and levels of these skills we need to develop. Again, from the Upbeat case studies, it appears to us that it is the development of qualities and levels of engagement that is the most generally relevant to almost all forms of academic enterprise. So on the basis of this engagement dimension, we need to create an engagement